Hello, hello, and welcome to another edition of the Law Firm Blueprint. I'm one of your hosts, Jay Ruane, CEO of the criminal mastermind Firm Flex, Ruane Attorneys, Finalize. I got a ton of things, but over there's my man, Seth Price, who's just got a couple. He's got Blue Shark Digital, powerhouse SEO for lawyers all across the country, hundreds and hundreds of clients, managing it so deftly, as well as managing partner of Price Benowitz, DC, Maryland, Virginia, South Carolina, Arizona, Louisiana, Tallahassee, and Timbuktu. Seth, how's your week going this week?
It's going well, but I'm real excited. I'm fired up about this discussion today because you and I have been sort of like you talk about having two things to run, and people often ask me, "Hey, where do you spend your time? How do you do it?" And at this point, it's managing, right? I don't have a caseload, and I'm not building links. But the question is, how do you effectively create and scale a business so that it's balanced, it's smart growth, it has a foundation, it has how do you pyramid? And the topic du jour to talking today about mid-level management and like how do you take yourself and allow the organization to grow in a stable way while making sure that what you need gets done all the way down the line.
So this is something that I've hinted at, and I'm going to be honest with everybody in the audience. We've had our own troubles here in my firm dealing with this issue. And about a year ago, I talked about the need for us to bring in someone in a auditor role, I guess we called it, which essentially is middle management. And one of the problems that I found myself, and I'm going to give you a little bit of background about my situation. I'm going to try to get your input on it because I'm going to ask you to sort of be consigliere to me, and you could be my Tom Hagen. Here's the situation. Middle management essentially is expensive, right? Because they're not contributing to bottom line revenue, and you need them to sort of make sure that the legal operations get accomplished, right? So they're seen as somewhat of a revenue drain. And I have been reticent to bring them in because of that mindset that
Understood, but you're not special. This is all business. I'm just saying, like when you start out, I remember when I started out with like a real estate and I was doing some rental properties, right? If you go and you collect the rent and you put the person in, it's very profitable, right? So now you have, let's say 10 doors. Well, now you have a guy doing it, right? So, okay, you pay him a salary, you budget that, you have your 10 doors. Let's say you get to, and I got to several hundred doors at one point, 400 doors. Then you have not only people doing work, but you have people overseeing it. And I think you've hit on something, two things. One is the expense, which means it's not just hiring another person, but for every X number of people, which I'm just using round numbers. Let's say for every six $50,000 people, whether it be pre-lit paralegals, whether it be intake, you need a person for them to report to, which means that you're not just paying their salary, but now you're paying the salary of the person managing them. And that it starts to blow your mind, because when you do a pro forma and you're thinking about where you're going, you don't necessarily feel that. But if you don't have it, as you don't,
yeah, it's almost like you have this sort of dip where like everyone's reporting to you and you're scaling and you're growing, and then you bring in these people and your revenue dips, and you almost need to scale even more, grow even more to really get the money out of those people in that middle management role. And here's the situation that I'm running into that I need some advice on. We are in a good spot. We are happy where our revenues are. We are growing. We're growing intentionally. We're not growing exponentially. I mean, I can remember, in my past, there was a year where I hired 6 lawyers at once. Like I was just like, give me all you got. I have more business than I know what to do with. And I didn't do it well. I hired some great people. They've all left me to go on to different and better things for their own careers. And I didn't have any of that middle management in place. So we didn't hold them accountable to the metrics, the KPIs that we need to do. I didn't even know about KPIs at the time. And that type of thing. And so I'm trying to get to a place where I build in those sort of managers auditors, whatever you want to call them. I don't want them to be, I mean, I say auditors because I want the person in management looking at the files, making sure things are getting done so that we can move the files down the line and close them as quickly as possible. For the staff, they don't like to be audited, so maybe we call them managers in that respect. But here's the thing. There's almost a point where you have to bring these people in, but you haven't scaled enough that you need to spend as much as it's necessary to spend to hire somebody who's competent. So you're at a point where it's like all of a sudden your revenues take a massive hit. And the only way to really get beyond that is to scale further, right? But what if that's not my intent?
You're stuck in that middle, right? So there's always decisions. I speak to people at Blue Shark like, hey, I'm a solo. Well, I'm like, unless you want to scale, spending a lot on marketing when you have a nice referral practice, why do it, right? You might as well stay solo. That's it. But once you do spend money, then if you don't hire those additional attorneys, you can't justify the marketing expense and get that ROI to make it worth it. The example I'll give you was a solo who's doing like 400,000 themselves, who thinks, hey, I'm going to start marketing. And if I market, I can get an associate and do 550. I'm like, that's just not that exciting. You're better off without the headaches. Yes, maybe you could make an extra $50,000 marketing for 50, an extra associate. I'm using a very low dollar of 50, and then you make 50. That's not that. That's is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yeah. Well, and this leads me to another question. There's a lot of people in our communities online in the Blueprint Facebook group that are like, I want to scale, and I hear it a lot. And this, I'm gonna veer left right now before I bring it back. And I hear it a lot from men and women that I interact with at seminars, people who call me, people who send me DMs. I hear it constantly. I want to step back and just run the marketing and have somebody else do the legal work. I hear it a lot of times from lawyers that are, say, 45 to 50 plus, and they say, I'm sick of going to court. I'm sick of taking depositions. I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to run the marketing and let somebody else do the work. And I'm going to ask you a question. And I'd like to get an honest answer. In fact, I got this call this week. I talked to a lawyer who's a friend of mine who says, I want to move to I want to move from where I have my practice to another state where I find it's more fun to live. I don't like where I live now. There's not a lot of social opportunity for me. So I'm going to move to this other state and I'm going to run the marketing for my firm. This guy has zero experience running marketing, doesn't know how to code a page. Not that you have to know how to do that. Doesn't know how to write compelling copy, doesn't know how to set up a pay-per-click campaign, doesn't know how to do A/B tests. But believes I can run the marketing.
Well, but there's so many issues there, right? The first is they're not necessarily best suited to do it, right? You just identify the litany of that. Right. Second, you better, if you're taking yourself out of the sausage making and you are right now a component, you have to find somebody to replace that, which is not free. So you have the cost of that. And what percentage of you are they going to be? Sometimes they're as good or better, but often the person you're willing to pay for will not be. Do they care the way you do if it's a JOB versus a piece of the company? And then you're a remote manager, which comes with a whole nother set of, an absentee owner, which comes with a whole other set of issues.
Right. And what I said to this person who called in was, you may say, oh, I want to run the marketing because you like interacting with the marketing vendors and it's exciting to bring in new business, but you could really be hurting your business if you just take over the marketing with no knowledge of the core things you need to know in this role. You could.
I'm not even getting there, Jay. Let's assume they do nothing. Sometimes that's what's going on, right? We have people, clients of Blue Shark, who we do that, and they are the middleman. They've stepped out. You're friends with some have done it successfully, but they also are well aware of the fact that they're going to be making a smaller percentage because they are not, if they're not doing the sausage making, somebody else is. A third of revenue, whatever percentage it is, needs to go to somebody who's going to do that work. And when they fall out of place, you may have to step back in. It's not, there's a reason that it is much, much harder to say, hey, I'm just going to be a marketing guy and send everything out, because obviously you don't get the repeat business. But, will everybody pay you for it? What's the quality being done? If they're paying you a percentage, will your cases come after somebody else? All those different issues are mixed up in that. But if you have enough volume, if your marketing is good enough, you can do it as long as you're okay with what those net economics are, which are not going to be one for one. You're not pulling yourself out of something where you're essential. The odds of it doing well is small, and then the net revenue to you is going to be much, much less than if you were there, because you just removed the entire operation for a smaller firm.
Yeah, and so it causes a lot of questions. It causes a lot of I think what it does is, I don't want to speak ill of people that I'm friendly with, but we had a colleague that essentially was running a practice and wasn't involved, didn't know where the checking accounts were, and that whole thing blew up on him. And he's no longer practicing law. He's now teaching at a school. But he just wasn't involved in his business whatsoever. And he had sort of abdicated any responsibility. But I'm not saying that people.
Something came up this week along those lines. Michael Gerber, friend of the show, guest on our show. He wrote one of the best books on how to run a business. Right? I mean, work on your business, not in your business. But, and he takes this to the nth degree, but he came to a legal conference a number of years ago, and it was to say it was an icy reception is being kind. He almost got booed off stage. He was so out of touch with, if you did pure e-myth in an existing law firm and said, poof, it's e-myth, you would be in a lot of trouble. You would know your check. There are all these things that would be out of sight, out of mind. And it can lead, history is written by the victor. If nobody steals from you and the bar doesn't complain and, there's no issues, maybe, but there's a lot of tumultuous waters out there.
Well, so this leads me to my next issue that's come up in my office, and I wonder how you deal with it. We have a number of lawyers, and it's not just lawyers, it's even staff members, where, according to their KPIs, they have 5 tasks that they need to is their core function within our firm. Go to court, counsel clients, or my office administrators, make sure that the checks get paid on time, that type of thing. And what I have found is, in a number of situations, and I don't know, maybe this goes back to something that you said earlier. So I'll give you a lot of credit for it. You do what you love. But I've got staffers who have 5 tasks, and they'll do 3, 4 of them. But that 5th task that is part of their job is always getting set aside. It's not getting accomplished. And they're hired to do that job. They should be doing that job. It's in, it's something, it's in for example, in my marketing department, we have somebody who's supposed to accomplish something. They're not accomplishing it. And they're saying that they're, well, I'm working, and I can see that they are working, but they're also supposed to accomplish this one part of outreach that they're not doing. And that's hampering some of my plans. So
look, it's something I've seen over and over again. I saw it back in the day when I decided I wanted reviews to be the point person to use through intake. And it wasn't originally part of their job. I brought it to the intake team. And 4 months later, I said, how many reviews do we get? And it was almost nothing. And they're like, oh, we got busy. But it wasn't ever internalized. So I think there are 2 issues that I see. One is it perceived as part of their job? Because when you add a task, very often, that to me has been the biggest issue. When a task is added in and somebody doesn't internalize it and buy into it, which they don't always tell you, it just doesn't get done. And the second is when there are 2 different types of tasks that need to be done, one of which might be, let's say, project management wise, and one might be creative. And the person, isn't sort of suited for one, you'll find out that the one that they're not suited for will just be ignored. Now, in a built-out firm, you have KPIs, everything's being measured, and it's great. But many of the listeners of our show are in growth mode. And during that, it's very often harder to catch that because you're building things. And as you're building them, it's easy to say you must have KPIs for everything. But in growth mode, you don't even know what to set as KPIs. You just want to make sure you're creating things that will build into them. So I think that in growth mode, that's where it can be most treacherous, because you get somebody and you see a lot that you like. And then you have the question, let's go back to my intake from years ago. I had this amazing intake manager, one of my favorite people that ever worked at the firm. He laid an egg. It was the worst look that he ever had. This is years and years ago, but I'm not going to I want him to focus on it. My answer, and we just, when we first started talking about this stuff before we even had a podcast, was, okay, go hire somebody to focus on, cultivating reviews, make that separate, and let intake be there, because for whatever reason, your intake team isn't buying in. I had a junior manager on that team that thought that asking for reviews was crass. It wasn't professional. I'm like, I couldn't convince him of it. It was his mishigas. It wasn't like this was a super A player. He had other issues, clearly, but that permeated my team. I couldn't get that team to ask for reviews at the end of a case. So I'm like, okay, as my law partner would say, round peg, square hole. That's his favorite saying, but I'm not going to keep, if it's not happening and they can monetize the intake team and they're doing a good job and you're paying X amount and they're answering your calls and they're doing what you need, great. Do you take tasks away from people, which is sort of rewarding, give them less work? Because
that's the question I have, is because then it's just, I can keep my job and not do half of it and suffer no consequences.
Right. And what I would say is, when a job is being done well, if you need the corpus of it, is that ever the point where, as a manager, let's go back, because as our firms grow, there may not, I'll bring it back to this, which is, we may not have all the managers with all the skill sets we need, which means us as owners end up back in those positions. But if you could sort of say, hey, I see that this person's doing these 4 things I love well. They're ignoring this. I don't want to reward bad behavior, which is our first reaction. Can we get ourselves over that to say, you know what? If they do these 4 things and they just focus on that and there's not a negativity towards the thing they don't like, okay. And can we build and grow with that? Is that something that you talk about auditors, as the super auditor, need to be aware of? And it's jarring, because I remember this was an amazing guy, a double Purple Heart recipient, one of my favorite people that ever been through the firm. They didn't look at reviews. This wasn't the same person who didn't think we should be asking them, but that when you have those life moments, you're like, you know what? Intake's pretty important. Let's have them do that. I'm going to go. And it was you who said, go hire somebody. Originally it was domestic, now international. What can we do? Because as we know, if you send a text or an email to somebody, you get X number of reviews. If you call up and thank them for, their patronage and would you leave it, that number goes up. But if you have people that don't like it, and I see that even within my own staff currently, there are people that love getting reviews, and there are people that it's just not in their DNA. They may be great at what they do, but that's not what drives them. Even with money incentivized, it doesn't happen. Should I complain about it, or should I just, now with international labor for a few dollars an hour, is it worth having somebody else take that? It would be better if it was the same person. I wish it was, but I also have somebody who's amazing at running a case and getting the maximum value for somebody in the PI department. I want to get rid of this and have the love fest for the stuff that's right.
But it would seem to me then really you're almost at a point where you are always hiring, because no matter what, it's no matter if I have an intake person who's got 4 jobs, they're going to like 1 or 2 of them better than the other 2. And we can come down to a point where it's literally like assembly line. You only do one thing and you do it all day. But then here's the problem with that, Seth.
I'm laughing. Maybe Gerber was onto something.
But here's the problem with that. We are not selling widgets that.
I know.
Listen out. we a lot of what we do is we sell relationships. We maintain our client base for 9 months to 18 months, most of us, sometimes much longer. And having long-standing relationships is important, and people get burned out if they do one thing and only one thing over and over and over again, and then you don't even know that they're burned out until you get them knocking on your door saying, guess what, I'm quitting, I'm going to do something else.
Well, Jay, and look, yes, but you can't even get to that long-term relationship if they're being tasked with stuff they hate. So yes, doing something, like, I'm not saying you should do one thing over and over again. It may be 3, 4, or 5 things, but if 6 and 7 or 6, 7, and 8 are abhorrent to them, and they're not going to tell you that. Nobody says, "Hey."
So how do we find out what's abhorrent to them?
When you find out it's not being done. When you find out a review is not being generated, and that it's not a time thing, it's the ethos of the person, that they love talking to people when they call in. They don't want to call and ask for something. I'm just making, whatever the situation is. If it's somebody who loves filing and doing, loves a certain piece of their job, but there's a piece of it. What I'm saying is, as you look at it, and again, hopefully as you get bigger, you have more oversight, or your managers come to you and say, this isn't being done, and you have your correction meeting, you have your come to Jesus. At some point, you have your come to Jesus meeting, and something isn't being done by somebody on the team. Can you salvage the person and say, hey, look, you're really great at these things, let that be done? Is that something that would, is that because you're taught, it keeps the person, it keeps them there longer term, it keeps them happy. Assuming, but there's a reason I have a F ton of employees, when you see these things, you're then needing somebody else to do it. Now, there are situations where if it's a piece of a job, not a whole job, you can shift that to somebody who does love it. I always say, I'm going back to reviews, for example, I wish every firm had a hugger. I wish I had a hugger. When the person comes in, they get their check, they get their hug, that person's getting a review more than anybody else. Nobody's saying no to the hugger, especially by the time the phone is handed to the hugger to type the review in themselves. I'm being facetious, but I've seen that at other firms. Right. So, I think the question is, when we talk, let's bring it back to our first topic, which was those managers. Part of the job of that manager is to figure out what is being done and what isn't being done. If they can stop entire things that are not being done and figure that out and bring that to you, because the average manager is not going to be able to say, you know what, I'm good with this person doing 80% of this, and they'll just spend their entire time on that 80%. Are you ever at a point where, because if you don't do that and you keep pushing, you have your come to Jesus meeting, and then you're like, okay, now what? That person's going to break. Forget about long-term because they're bored of doing the same thing over and over again. You're not even going to get to long-term because they don't have it. I have it right now. I'll give you an example with one of my favorite lawyers at the firm, where we have been continuously trying to be ahead of the curve on the ethics of how money is earned by the firm. And we've put in ahead of the curve milestones for everything within a case. And there are lawyers that are like, you know what, I'm just going to wait till the end of my case. I'll just earn everything then. But as a larger firm, that can really hurt you with cash flow, right? And theoretically, it's not supposed to be done that way. You're supposed to earn as you go along. And we have one lawyer who he has a mental block. He can't conceptualize this. It would make him more easy with less work, but he has to take a step of learning it. And again, it's one of my favorite people at the firm. And my answer is, okay, how could I solve this problem? Let's get somebody on our accounting team to sit with him for 30 minutes on the phone, where they'll just say yes, no, for each of his 50 to 80 cases. Have we hit a milestone? And hopefully after 2 or 3 sessions of this, he's like, I get it, I'll do it myself. But if you have a block, can you do something? Because I'm not losing this person. He's one of my favorite lawyers, very, a great lawyer who does well for the firm. If there's a piece of the job that somebody hates, can you remove it and allow them to love the rest? That is where, and again, if you don't have mid-level management, you very often aren't going to catch that. You're just going to have like stuff falling on the floor. You get upset and the person's going to be gone. Can a manager help you figure that out sooner?
So this brings me back a little, sort of full circle to our topic at the top of the show, and I want to conclude our show this week talking a little bit about something, and that is just where you are at on the journey. And I bring this up because I just happened this week to finish my 5 chapters for Tiger Tactics 2. That'll be coming out. I sent it out. Seth, I know you're going to be one of the co-authors. A lot of great co-authors are going to be on that. If you haven't read the first book, it's 5 of us who went through our journeys to becoming the law firms that we have today. Me, myself, Ryan McKean, Billy Mansky, Billy Tarasio, Teresa DeGray. But now coming up, I think we've got like 15 lawyers who have made the transition from owning a law firm to be the CEO. And so we're going to do the CEO edition. But really what I want to talk a little bit about is all the advice that's out there. And I recognized while I was writing and going back and reading the stuff that I had written, I'm at a definite different place in my firm where I am now than I was even 5 years ago, right before COVID, definitely 10 and 15 years ago as I started on this entrepreneurial journey. And I see people online proselytizing and saying, this is the way to do it. And I just want the audience to know, like, I am, I had my journey. I'm where I'm at, and I give you my advice from my life experiences. But there are some people out there who have virtually no scale, but have deigned themselves to be knowledgeable, and are basically saying this is the way to do things, and they've never even considered any alternatives. They haven't lived through any structure. Do you see that there are some people out there, and I'm not trying to like pick at certain people, that's not my intention on this, but it's more about getting the message across to our listeners about, know where you are and be confident in that before you take the advice of people who don't know your practice area, don't know your community, don't know where you're coming from, and don't go chasing ideas that may have worked for other people until they're going to work for you. Right.
I mean, I think it's a balance like anything else, right? It depends. Meaning, first and foremost, you have to look through the economic lens. Does somebody have an agenda selling you a certain format? If social is their mantra and they happen to sell a course on social, is that, it may work, it may not, but there's an economic incentive. And I always want to filter out where that is, and present company included, right? I'm a big believer in digital. I also have a way of making, a business that does that. So I believe in it. There's something behind it, but understanding that like what works for one person may not work for another, A. And then I think B, the piece that I think that the root of where this is coming from, I believe with what you're talking about, is the issues when you're a solo are different than when you're a 3-person law firm, are different than when you're a 10-lawyer law firm, are different than when you're a 100-person, and that who you're listening to and where they are in that journey is definitely one. And that there are times, present company included, where there are people so far ahead of the curve, they can't remember to where I am, more or less where somebody who's a solo is. And that I think that you need to, that there are things that they have overcome to get there, that at each of those stages, there's certain things that are true no matter what, that you want to aspire to, but there are points where you don't have an individual. We talked earlier today, where if you don't have an individual person for each of these things, that's normal. And if you did, you'd be unprofitable because you'd spend all the money filling out. So to me, it's understanding thinking critically about who you're hearing from, where they are in their journey, whether there's an economic incentive, and then finally, are their values the same as yours? There are people that would be like, fire everybody, like who would say somebody didn't do 2 of their things, fire them. There are people like that. And so I think that as you take in advice, it's as opposed to just writing stuff down aimlessly. It's thinking critically. You don't want to be dismissive out of hand. At the same time, I think that it's important to understand and look at the source of who that person is. You see every once in a while Facebook ads for people we've never heard of who are popped out of nowhere and want to tell you how to run your law firm. Maybe they're right, maybe that's what they're doing, but there's a good chance that somebody just said, hey, there are a bunch of lawyers with a lot of money, and if I throw this much money into social media, I'll be able to have an audience, and I'll pivot and figure it out. But there are a bunch of guys I've never heard of and never met, have no idea who these people are, who have popped out of nowhere, usually young with like a wife in their videos. I'm sure you've seen them from time to time. I'm like, why, so it goes to your point, which is, why should I be listening to this?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Okay. So that's going to take it to the end of our show. I do want to talk about one thing that's coming up next week. And if you haven't had a chance to register, you can do so down below or in our show notes if you're listening on the podcast. And that is the Law Firm Growth Summit. Seth, tell us a little bit about your presentation that you're going to be giving to the Law Firm Growth Summit, because I think it's something that a lot of people will get something out of.
Sure. So look, what we have seen is that with local search, everybody's trying to get into the 3-pack. There's just been an explosion. Every day, different nuances are being added. Do any of these nuances by themselves, like move the needle? Maybe, maybe not. But together, we're seeing significant impact to what Google is allowing you to do. And I'm seeing more and more with Google wanting to control the 3-pack and maybe at some point a 5-pack experience, but the idea that they want to limit what's going on. I'm now seeing, this is tangent, but on hotel searches, when searching on mobile devices, you don't even get beyond their local search result. They're not even showing, there are places like that. So,
Yeah.
We're going to be focused on that. And then secondarily, for those in the plaintiff space, the LSAs obviously are essential. Every little piece that you can do to get your spend up on the LSA is important. So we'll be talking about that. So excited. Moshe's creating a virtual conference, which I know you love. The idea of not having to travel, but be able to network with all these people, really excited about.
Well, it's interesting. I was looking last night and I ran it by my wife, and I think I will be traveling in the new year. I think I'm going to come watch you in Austin at the end of February at PubCon, where you're going to be talking about local search. This really has become your area. I'm going to be talking a little bit about social media next week on Tuesday for the Law Firm Growth Summit, all about what lawyers do wrong. And there are some simple fixes because obviously what you want to do is, if you're going to put any attention towards social media, you want to do it the right way. So I would encourage anybody who's watching, who's listening, if you haven't signed up yet, please be sure to sign up down below. Make sure that you are going to sign up to attend. I mean, it's a great thing. It's a couple of days of basically back-to-back presentations. You can identify the ones that you want to see, set them on your calendar and pop in for those, and obviously stay for as much as you can. But if you need to work around your schedule, you can do that. And of course, I'm sure there'll be opportunity to buy the recordings if you register for the free conference. So it's win-win. If you miss something that you really like, you can get that as well. So I highly recommend the Law Firm Growth Summit if that's something that you could do. So Seth, I want to tease a little bit about next week when we're doing it. I discovered something. I was talking to a friend of mine, Justin McShane out of Pennsylvania, who's very scientific in his approaches. And I actually found a niche vertical that's generated $200,000 or actually more than that off of about a $20,000 marketing spend and nothing else. So I want to know and talk a little bit about this more in depth next week about how to 10x this, because if this is calm seas and open waters, and there is no other market maker, maybe I should go all in and invest $100,000 and see if I can turn it into a $1 million business.
And you know me, I'm going to be, hey, can we incrementally increase that, knowing that paid search is not one, is not one for one, and that there are diminishing, margins. That said, thrilled you found this. Let's find a way to maximize whatever it is. Just don't want to see you, spike money away and learn what we all know, which is that if you 10x, paid spend in the legal niches, generally there's not enough inventory, particularly in a statewide practice, to be able to support it.
Yeah, so that's why I'm going to do some more research. I'm going to have some more numbers, and we're going to talk about this as we go. I'm not going to talk about the vertical yet because I want to see if I have some first mover advantage, but who knows? I live my life as an open book. I've never gotten poor from giving stuff away, so I like to keep that as my mantra. But that's going to do it for us folks this week here on the Law Firm Blueprint. As always, please invite your friends to join us in the Facebook group and follow us along every Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific. And of course, you can catch us as well on our podcast replay, which is available wherever podcasts are available. We're now on Amazon Podcasts. I didn't even know Amazon had podcasts, but we're up on Amazon, of course, Apple. We're on Google. Download, take it on the go, listen to it when you're traveling or out for a walk, do whatever you need. Seth, any final words for
final words? The best news of the day, the fact that you will be in Austin, and although I've cut down on red meat, I'm going to save my red meat for some brisket with you in Austin.
Oh yeah, listen, I was there. I spoke for the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association in September this year, the DOI-DLA Texas, and I forget the name of the barbecue joint that we went to, but I basically convinced myself to go back there for PubCon so I could have this barbecue again. There's basically 3 things I want in Austin. I'm going to go to Perry's and get the pork chop again. I'm going to go to this barbecue joint, and then I'm going to get some tacos. And so basically, I'm going for 4 things. Seth, you're number 4 on the list.
I can take it. As long as I'm along for the ride for 1 through 3.
You're on the list. You're on the list.
Very good.
Hey, you know what? I'm a Blue Shark customer, so maybe I'll make you buy. So sounds there you
good.
Go.
It's on me. Brisket on me. Although I got to tell you, Jay can put it away. I may have to go to my CFO and see if this is okay.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. Have a great week. We'll see you at the Law Firm Growth Summit and then here live again next week on the Law Firm Blueprint. Bye for now.